Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Big thanks to Iceni for suggesting this week's topic.
Oh, yeah. Isoni always has the good ideas.
And as always, everyone listening should go check out his awesome YouTube channel.
He's got great content.
So today, we're going to dive into the world of cannabis and a man who has been dubbed the King of Cannabis.
Oh, wow.
Arjan Roskam.
Okay.
Now, King. That's a pretty bold title. So we're going to figure out what makes him royalty in the world of weed.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to start off by highlighting some of his achievements because they're
Yeah, he's got a ton of them.
pretty impressive. He founded the Greenhouse Coffeeshops,
Okay.
created the Greenhouse Seed Company, and even launched the Strain Hunters documentaries,
Oh, wow.
taking viewers on a global cannabis journey.
I've seen those.
Oh, yeah.
They're really interesting.
And on top of all that, he's won over 38 High Times Cannabis Cups,
38.
more than anyone else on the planet.
That's mind-blowing.
It really is when you think about it. Yeah, it's pretty staggering.
It is.
Okay, so we know he's achieved a ton, but I'm curious about the path he took. How did he go from just another grower
Right.
to the top dog in the cannabis world? Wasn't the King of Cannabis title already belonging to someone else?
You're totally right. Back in the 80s, a guy named Neville was considered the king of cannabis.
Okay.
He was a real trailblazer, bringing some of the most sought-after cannabis strains to Amsterdam and even starting the first seed bank there.
Oh, wow.
Called the Super Sativa Seed Club.
Okay.
But by 91, he kind of stepped back, leaving a sort of power vacuum in the scene.
Okay, so imagine Amsterdam in the 80s. What did the typical cannabis scene look like back then?
All right, so picture this. You walk into a coffee shop.
Okay.
It's dark, smoky, maybe a little cramped. The menu's pretty basic, mostly imported hash, and just a handful of standard strained. It wasn't exactly the high-end experience that many associate with Amsterdam today.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where Arjan enters the picture, right? He was all about those high-quality exotic strains, even when others weren't. But I heard his journey wasn't always easy, especially when it came to his love for haze strains. What made those so different, and why weren't others as into them?
Well, haze strains are known for being a bit finicky. They take a lot longer to flower, which means they weren't as profitable for growers who wanted quick turnaround times and high yields.
Okay.
And that hesitancy trickled down to coffee shops who weren't exactly lining up to sell a more expensive product that took longer to cultivate.
Right. So Arjan has this vision, this dedication to top-notch strains, but the market isn't quite catching up.
Right.
What did he do to bridge that gap?
Well, he did what any innovator would do. He took the reins and forged his own path. In 1992, he opened his own coffee shop called the Greenhouse.
Okay.
And his mission was clear focus on those exotic, high-quality strains, even if it meant going against the grain.
That's a pretty bold move considering the market at the time. I'm guessing that gamble paid off, right? Did people start to see the value in what he was offering?
His instincts were spot on. Just 1 year after the greenhouse opened its doors, Arjan entered the High Times Cannabis Cup, a competition that's basically the Oscars of the cannabis world.
Whoa.
And he walked away with the overall cup. It was a huge validation of his approach, showing the world that people were ready for a higher caliber of cannabis.
Wow. Talk about making a statement, and winning the Cannabis Cup wasn't just a one-time thing for him, was it?
Not even close. He went on an absolute winning streak, racking up an incredible number of victories at the High Times Cannabis Cup. By 1995, he was even featured on the cover of High Times magazine, which back then was like becoming cannabis royalty. It put him on the map internationally, attracting serious cannabis enthusiasts and even celebrities to the greenhouse.
I've heard that over 100 A-list celebrities have visited the greenhouse over the years. Everyone's from musicians to actors wanting to check out the place and maybe meet the king himself.
Yeah.
They even have their photos up on the walls, right?
It's true. The greenhouse became more than just a coffee shop. It turned into a destination, a place to experience the best of cannabis culture. And what's interesting is that Arjan was very strategic about these celebrity connections. He saw their platform as a way to spread his message of cannabis normalization and push for legalization on a global scale.
It's amazing to think about how much the global perception of cannabis has shifted in recent years. So many countries and U.S. states have legalized it for medicinal or even recreational use. Do you think Arjan's early advocacy played a role in that shift?
I'd say his work definitely contributed. He was one of the first to really champion cannabis in a public and unapologetic way. And now Amsterdam, which was once the epicenter of the movement, is just one of many places embracing cannabis openly.
From what you've described, it sounds like Arjan's success goes way beyond just one coffee shop. He's essentially built a full-blown cannabis empire, right?
Absolutely. He's expanded his reach beyond anyone's expectations. He's got multiple coffee shops, a globally recognized seed bank, a film company, a nutrients company, and even a foundation.
Okay, so he's obviously a gifted grower and a savvy businessman. But what else sets him apart? What's his secret sauce, so to speak?
One thing that's fascinating about Arjan is his use of media. He was one of the first to really leverage the power of online platforms for cannabis education. He started creating greenhouse grow videos on YouTube, sharing his knowledge and techniques with anyone who wanted to learn.
He was like the original cannabis influencer. And those String Hunters documentaries were a huge hit too, weren't they? I remember watching them and being blown away by the sheer diversity of cannabis cultures around the world.
The Strain Hunter series was a game changer. It wasn't just about showcasing exotic locations or finding rare strains. Arjun was highlighting the cultural and economic importance of cannabis, particularly for farmers in developing countries. He was shining a light on a side of cannabis that many people had never seen before.
So he's got the coffee shops, the seed bank, the documentaries, the YouTube channel. Has he done any mainstream media appearances as well?
Oh, definitely. He's been featured on shows like National Geographic's Drugs Inc. and Vice's Kings of Cannabis, bringing his knowledge and advocacy to a wider audience.
It's amazing to see how far he's come from those dimly lit coffee shops in the 80s to becoming a global cannabis icon. His journey really shows how much the industry has evolved, and it makes you wonder, what's next?
It's a great question. Arjun's journey from grower to global cannabis icon is incredible, and his influence on the industry is undeniable. But the world of cannabis is constantly changing, so what's next for him and for the industry as a whole? That's something we'll explore further in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, so stay tuned as we continue our exploration of Arjan Roskam, the King of Cannabis. We'll be back right after this.
You know, thinking back to those early days in Amsterdam, it's remarkable how Arjun's unwavering commitment to quality really set him apart.
It's interesting. You'd think in a market like that with so much demand that everyone would be striving for the best possible product. What made Arjan's approach so different from the prevailing mindset back then?
Well, remember, this was the early days of the Amsterdam cannabis scene. Many growers and coffee shops were focused on quantity, quick turnaround times, and keeping costs low. Arjun really went against the grain, choosing to prioritize those more exotic, sometimes harder to grow strains, even if it meant sacrificing efficiency.
It seems like he almost had a hunch, a feeling that people were ready for something more, something truly special when it came to their cannabis experience.
And his instincts were dead on, winning the High Times Cannabis Cup just a year after opening. The greenhouse was a huge turning point. It not only validated his approach, but also had a ripple effect throughout the industry, showing others that quality could be a winning strategy.
So he wasn't just creating great cannabis, he was elevating the entire experience, turning it into something more refined, more nuanced. It wasn't just about getting high, it was about appreciating the subtleties of the plant.
Absolutely, and that attention to detail, that dedication to quality extended beyond just the cannabis itself. He created a whole vibe, an atmosphere at the greenhouse that was unlike anything else at the time.
You're talking about the whole greenhouse experience, right? It wasn't just about the product, it was about the place, the people, the energy.
Exactly. The greenhouse became a hub for cannabis enthusiasts, a place to connect with like-minded individuals from all over the globe. And when you add those celebrity sightings to the mix, it created a sense of excitement, an aura of exclusivity. People wanted to be part of what Arjun was building.
It's like he was creating a brand, a lifestyle even. He understood that cannabis was more than just a plant. It was a culture, a community.
And he was brilliant at cultivating that culture. He used his platform to educate people about cannabis, to advocate for its acceptance, and to foster a community built around shared values. It's quite remarkable when you think about it.
It's fascinating how he was able to seamlessly blend activism with entrepreneurship. He was clearly making a profit, but it felt like he was genuinely passionate about pushing for change, about challenging the stigma surrounding cannabis.
He had this vision of cannabis going mainstream, of being accepted as a legitimate industry, and he worked tirelessly to make that happen. He wasn't afraid to speak out, to use his platform to amplify the message, even when it wasn't always popular.
And that work has had a huge impact, inspiring countless others to join the movement, to fight for legalization, and to create their own businesses within the cannabis industry.
That's right. His legacy extends beyond his own accomplishments. He paved the way for a new generation of cannabis entrepreneurs, activists, and enthusiasts.
But his journey hasn't always been smooth sailing, has it? I imagine the cannabis world can be pretty competitive, even cutthroat at times. Did he face any challenges or pushback along the way?
Of course. Any industry that's growing as rapidly as cannabis is going to have its share of conflict and competition. And Arjan, with his level of success and visibility, was bound to attract some criticism.
Were there people who questioned his methods, his motives, or even his commitment to the plant itself?
Absolutely. There were always skeptics, those who thought he was more focused on building his empire than on the greater good of the cannabis community. And like anyone in the public eye, he's had to deal with his share of rumors and controversies.
But at the end of the day, it's his actions, his achievements that speak the loudest. 38 High Times Cannabis Cups, a global brand, and a legacy of advocacy that's pretty hard to argue with.
Those awards, that recognition, they represent more than just personal success. They symbolize a dedication to pushing the boundaries of cannabis cultivation, to constantly innovating and striving for excellence.
He's played a huge role in demystifying cannabis, in breaking down stereotypes, and in bringing it into the mainstream conversation. It's an incredible legacy to leave behind.
It really is. And his story isn't over yet. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of the more specific aspects of Arjan's work. We'll delve into his innovative cultivation techniques, his efforts to preserve rare cannabis genetics, and his global advocacy for cannabis legalization.
So stay tuned as we continue our exploration of Arjan Roskam, the King of Cannabis. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Arjan Roskam.
The King of Cannabis.
The King of Cannabis, we've talked about his incredible rise to fame and his impact on the industry, but now I kind of want to get into the details, the nuts and bolts of what makes his approach to cannabis so unique.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, one of the most fascinating things about Arjan is his deep understanding of cannabis genetics. He's not just growing any old plant, he's meticulously selecting and breeding strains for specific qualities, almost like a master craftsman shaping his raw materials.
So it's like he's a cannabis whisperer, right? Able to bring out the hidden potential of each plant, coaxing out those desirable traits and effects that people crave.
Exactly. And he's been doing this for decades, building up an incredible library of genetics, some of which are incredibly rare and highly sought after by, people in the cannabis world.
Wow. So we're talking legendary strains that most people only dream of.
Yeah.
But he's not keeping all these genetics to himself, does he? I remember you mentioning his seed company.
Right. The Greenhouse Seed Company is one of the most successful seed banks in the world. And it's not just about branding or hype. Their strains have consistently won awards and accolades at competitions like the High Times Cannabis Cup.
So he's not just interested in winning awards for himself, he's empowering others to grow high-quality cannabis by sharing his knowledge and genetics.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it speaks to his role as a teacher and a mentor within the cannabis community.
Yeah?
Think back to those greenhouse grow videos we talked about earlier. He was one of the first to really embrace online platforms to share his knowledge and techniques,
Right?
opening up the world of cannabis cultivation to anyone with an internet connection.
Totally.
He was way ahead of the curve, like a cannabis influencer before influencer marketing was even a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't just about the technical aspects of growing. He was sharing the history, the culture, the passion behind cannabis.
Absolutely. He's always been a strong advocate for cannabis education, understanding that knowledge is key to dispelling myths and promoting a more informed and nuanced understanding of this complex plant.
And his advocacy goes far beyond education. We talked earlier about his work with celebrities to raise awareness, but he's also been a vocal supporter of legalization efforts around the world, hasn't he?
Right. His work on the Strain Hunters documentaries is a major part of that. Those journeys weren't just about finding rare strains. They were about showcasing the importance of cannabis in different cultures, highlighting its medicinal and economic potential, and humanizing the people who rely on it.
So it's like he became this cannabis ambassador, traveling the world, sharing the plant's story, its potential, and the positive impact it can have.
Yeah, and he did it all with this contagious enthusiasm, this genuine passion for the plant that was impossible to ignore. He made it cool, exciting, aspirational, which is a huge shift from the negative stereotypes that used to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, he's helped to transform cannabis from this taboo topic into something that's openly discussed, researched, and celebrated in many parts of the world. That's a pretty incredible legacy, wouldn't you say?
It is truly remarkable. Arjan Roskam's story is a powerful example of what can happen when you combine passion, innovation, and a belief in something you love.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Arjan Roskam, what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners? What can they learn from Arjan's journey that they can apply to their own lives, whether they're, cannabis enthusiasts or not?
Well, I think the biggest lesson here is the power of following your passion even when it goes against the grain. Arjan had this vision for what cannabis could be, and he wasn't afraid to pursue it even when others doubted him.
Right.
He showed us that it's possible to achieve great things when you combine knowledge, dedication, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
That's a great point. And as we close out our exploration of the King of Cannabis, I want to encourage everyone listening to stay curious, keep learning, and maybe even take a page from Arjan's book and explore something you're passionate about, no matter how unconventional it might seem. Who knows, you might just spark a revolution of your own.
Well, thanks for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of Arjan Roskam.
We'll see you next time.